Let me bring in Liberal Senator Alex Antic. Thanks for joining us, Alex. So you must have read this independent review with some interest. It just confirms that state and federally governments overreacted, and you're part of the federal government, or what was the federal coalition government. Surely the key factor there was the overseas border, and this review says it was wrong to have such a tough quarantine regime on the overseas border, that Australians, holders of Australian passports, should have been allowed to come home.
Look, Chris, thank you. You're absolutely right. It's almost difficult to know where to start with such a broad topic in this case. There are so many examples of things that I think were done poorly or were not addressed at all. I mean, the fundamental one for mine is the failure of government to stop bureaucratic overreach, and that applies at federal level as it did at state level. And that was really the reason why myself and Gerard Rennick had such a strong position on it and took a stand against our own government. I felt as though, and I know Senator Rennick felt as though there were lots of things that were going on that were just wrong. The border stuff was a classic. Just in last estimates, I put that question to Professor Paul Kelly as to why it was that the government was stopping people from going overseas when we knew that the injections weren't stopping transmission. And I was told that wasn't right. Well, guess what? It was right. 6 months down the track, everyone's a new expert, and all of this stuff is coming up. But as you say quite clearly, many medical experts were saying this all the way along. The question in my mind is, what do we have to do to ensure that Australia doesn't continue to become a vassal state of the globalists by simply listening to the World Health Organization and other organisations, and start making sure that we start listening to our own doctors who give us their advice, and we take it, in what best suits the Australian people? That was not the case in the last 2 years, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, the report doesn't go deeply into vaccine issues, but that's another great area for investigation, because so much misinformation was put out about vaccines. A lot of us were conned into the suggestion that vaccines will stop transmission, and the data has shown that's not the case. Now, the point is, we need a really thorough Royal Commission that looks at state and federal decisions throughout this period. But the major parties, Labor and Liberal, and governments, state and federal, all have an interest, and their bureaucracies all have an interest in minimising the accountability here, because so many of them were complicit.
Yeah, look, it's exactly right. I mean, I think that if ever there was a need for a federal royal commission into an issue that's come probably in my lifetime, I think this is it. This is so fundamentally changed the Australian psyche and the Australian landscape. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we've heard from Prime Minister Albanese that he is, at least amenable to this. But what we don't want is a Royal Commission that leaves anyone out. We don't want a Royal Commission that's tailored such that it doesn't dig into the dealings of the Queensland or the Victorian state governments. They were some of the worst, in my view. We need a full root and branch review, which digs in, takes evidence, and does so in the manner that it would require people to be frank and honest. So it's an absolute essential part of the review. And look, can I say, the one thing that I am encouraged by is that people are starting to get it now. People that this time last year were calling people like myself a maniac are starting to understand what really happened and how far the hoodwinking went.
Spot on. Thanks for joining us, Alex. I appreciate it. Alex Antic, Liberal Senator for South Australia.